Hello and welcome to Labour Lens. I am Sharon Ijason. On this week's edition of the program, we're focusing on workplace safety and the need for workplace safety to be prioritized in every establishment. We will be right back. This is not the first time that students will be out to protest against the continued closure of public universities in Nigeria. For many hours, students displayed their displeasure over the ongoing strike by members of the Academic Staff Union of Universities (ASU) by blocking a section of the access road to the Muritala Muhammad International Airport, Lagos. The situation caused gridlock along the axis as vehicular movement in and out of the airport was stalled. The rain could not stop the protesting students from expressing themselves as they demand to be part of further negotiations between government and their striking lecturers.
They just meet themselves, disagree, agree, and going forward, it is the student that is being affected. So if they are responsible in their dealings, if they know they are not hiding anything, we have student bodies, we have NAS. Okay, NAS now has taken this struggle up. We are protesting every now and then. So what stopped them from including NAS in their negotiation? By September 28th, they will start their campaign. And that is our biggest fear. If they are not starting their campaign, they did not take education serious, what will happen when the campaign starts?
It's quite appalling that I entered school 2016 December. This is 2022 September. I'm still in school. And the students that paid house rent in January, it's about to expire, which means they are praying to have to spend extra money. I don't even know how to explain it, but it just shows that they do not take us seriously when it comes to the education sector. We're not asking for too much. End the ASU strike and fund education in Nigeria.
It's a continuous protest until they reach a resolution for us to resume back to our campuses.
Stranded motorists and passengers spoke on the development.
See people carrying their luggage and stuff to trek to the airport. I mean, you shouldn't be living like this. It just shows that the priority of the government lies elsewhere.
This is so embarrassing that a country like Nigeria will be at this stage. It's not affecting them directly, but indirectly, because we are going to hold them responsible for anything that happens in Nigeria.
While some of the demands of the striking lecturers have been met, they insist that the no work, no pay policy adopted by the federal government should not be implemented in their case. Other university-based workers' unions, including the Non-Academic Staff Union of Education and other allied institutions (NASU), the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities (SANO), and the National Association of Academic Technologists (NAT), recently returned to work following federal government intervention. Workers in the maritime and road transportation sector are collaborating to promote a hitch-free movement of trucks, goods and personnel within ports around the country, bonded terminals and Apapa in particular. The workers under the National Association of Road Transport Owners and Maritime Workers Union of Nigeria recently signed a memorandum of understanding to ensure the truck drivers adhere to the rules and refrain from illegal parking on the roads and highways.
On this note, and in hearing calls from our members and stakeholders for intervention, we are constrained to call on the federal government and its agencies, regulators, security operators, and concerned Nigerians to come to our aid in terms of firming up and putting in place an effective procedure for curtailing and nipping in the bud these leakages. The Port Standing Task Team is doing a great job, but still needs to be empowered to do more to completely sanitize the port access roads against illegal extortionists. In view of the above, we wish to appeal for further necessary action.
Only trying to rectify it and putting a stamp on it. The essence of collaborating with each other, like my president said, is to what? To support a good program laid down by Nigeria Port Authority. And at the same time, the welfare of the drivers are very paramount, because there's no how you're going to use a driver without taking care of their welfare. And that is why some of the associations are losing tracks, where they employ their drivers and they are not taking good care of them. And when you look at our road too, the driver cannot behave anyhow if you take care of him. If our roads are good, there's no how you're going to see any truck on the road. And with this collaboration, I think it's going to allow us to work with Nigeria Port Authority and other like-minded stakeholders in the port, so that we can have a free flow of traffic on the road.
The leadership of the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association (NECA) has announced that it will host the 30th edition of the Michael Omolayole Lecturer Series. The president of NECA, Taiwo Adeniyi, while briefing the press, says the theme of the lecture is titled Sustainable Development of the Agriculture Sector for National Well-Being.
Agriculture remains a fundamental and critical sector in the development of a nation. With the recent upsurge in banditry in the north and some other areas, which has created impediments for farmers going to farm and harvest crops, the importance of agriculture has been further brought to the fore. Also, with the Russia versus Ukraine war creating a breach and disruption in the supply chain of critical agricultural products, especially wheat, the need for a sustainable national policy on agriculture has become more critical to the world at large.
Where subject matter experts would come together, give their own opinions, solutions, and recommendations, and members of the business community who are present at the Omolayole lecture are also given the opportunity to ask questions that leads to policy formulation both on the private sector and on the public sector about the Africa Free Trade Agreement area. And this led to the interest of not only the business people but even the student members on how to take their role as youth in the AFTA agreement.
To the port as a whole, so that when Thursday next week arrives, we have a good representation of the corporates, Nigeria, of entrepreneurs, of even the masses on the street. So welcome to this very important program in honor of Dr. Michael Omolayole, as you know. And hoping that by the end of the program, we'll look back and say, yes, we've had a successful press conference.
The lecture is an annual event inaugurated in honor of Dr. Michael Omolayole, a doyen of management, industrial and human resources in Nigeria, and foremost leadership guru whose impact is still being felt within and outside the country. This is Adekunle Shokunbi, a 22-year-old boy who was working with Spring Feeds as a stockist for production of animal feeds in Lagos. Adekunle was involved in an accident at the workplace which cost him his right arm. According to him, the unfortunate incident occurred on the 5th of April 2022.
Ever since I got there, the normal way they have been doing it is whenever there's remnant inside the machine, the normal way they do it is just for them to use their hands to bring it out. So, and I've adapted to it. So when I switch it up, then I go to the machine. I was trying to use my hand to bring everything out. Fortunately, then I had the machine turned on. I was like, because I couldn't at the first instance, I can still feel my forearm. I felt it then. So I was even shouting that David, because that was the guy that on the machine. So I was just shouting at the top of my voice like, David, up the machine, because I was saying in pidgin. I said, up the machine, up the machine. So it was just on and offing until the thing sucked the whole of my hand in.
In an interview with TVC News, Adekunle's mother said her son contemplated suicide when he was receiving treatment at the hospital. Although he is now stabilized, she wants her son to be properly compensated because she is not sure of what more he can do with just one arm.
Ìṣẹ̀lẹ̀ ní April 5. So mo wà nílé náà sáré pè mí pé machine gé ọmọ mi lọ́wọ́. Àǹtí mi ẹni ká má jalè, ká má ṣe ìyàwó, ká má kẹ́gbẹ́kẹ́gbẹ́. Lẹ ṣe ní kóun lọ ṣiṣẹ́ kóun tó wọ school. Ẹ wo nǹkan, ó má ti di disabled.
Reacting to the incident, the chairperson of Lagos State chapter of Nigerian Labour Congress (NLC) issued a 14-day ultimatum to factories in the state to be safety compliant.
We are issuing a 14-day ultimatum, 2 weeks, 14-day ultimatum, in which we will mobilize our affiliates, the workers, to come out en masse against all these companies, and to ensure that we have a decent working environment for workers and for Nigerians.
I took time to visit Springfeed's factory at Itamaga area of Ikorodu in Lagos to know more about the safety culture in the company and why Adekunle Shokunbi has not been compensated. Occupation health and safety, according to the International Labour Organization, is the responsibility of every company that actually have workers in its place. With the look of things here, the company Seed Feeds is yet to give response on their own intervention.
The issue of accidents at the workplace is a serious issue. And the ratio, which I cannot lay my hand on now, but is so alarming. Whether physical, mental, or ailment, there are a lot of things that has to do with workplace issue as far as accident or ailment arising from because of the environment of the work. A serious issue. The current what we have, which is NSITF, was actually meant to address the problem arising from issues that require compensations. But the recent story we are hearing, the funds that are contributed by employer for the purpose of compensation are being diverted.
Without having minimum or at least minimum standard of safety, it should not be. It's something that can never be compromised, so that we can prevent avoidable deaths, loss of arms, fingers, and even sight. Terrible accidents are happening almost on daily basis, but most of these things can be traced to companies that are very complacent, that are not taking safety as and are not tracking safety with adequate importance it ought to be given. So we can reduce it to bare minimum. If only company can reawaken their sense of reason and placing higher value of safety in any workplace.
On the profile interview segment this week, I'll be speaking with the General Secretary of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Comrade Emmanuel Ugwoja. He brings us up to speed on the need for relevant stakeholders to do the needful in terms of monitoring, in terms of implementation of the needed facilities to ensure that workplaces are safe according to the International Labour Organization standard. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
A lot has been happening in the world of work, and it seems not to be so palatable because of so many challenges that the country is faced with. But first, I want to concentrate on the issue of industrialization and safety in the workplace. Right now, as we're speaking, there are a lot of accidents that have been happening in the workplace, and nobody seems to want to take responsibility. How would you react to this?
Yeah, it's a pretty sad one, actually, because each time we talk about industrialization and we don't focus on safety, particularly in our country, then we miss the point. Because rather than become again, we then turn it to a terrible phenomenon for our people. Because we have the challenge of genuine monitoring of the workplace, genuine inspection. The other day we were having a conversation around amending or reviewing regulations that have to do with the Factories Act. to bring it up to speed to global acceptable standards. And fortunately, even at the global level, the ILO has brought up the issue of health and safety. It's been prioritized and made a key issue in the world of work. It's now a fundamental right. It's now a human right issue. So, but increasingly, because of the desire to quickly make money, the desire to cut corners, we're having so much accidents in the factories, particularly with new work environments. The established work environments obviously have standard codes that they kind of are adhering to, but the new factories that are upcoming, that are being installed, who resort to cheap labor in quote to cut corners, don't put their workforce through proper training, particularly with regards to health and safety. So we're having a huge number of industrial accidents, particularly of young people, because that's what makes it more depressing. Young people are losing their limbs, losing their lives, and it's quite a frightening scenario.
What do you think should be done to ensure that most industrial organizations are safety compliant?
We need to increase enforcement of regulations, particularly where factories are sited, who gives the approvals for their buildings, for the arrangements of machinery in the workplace. What we are seeing increasingly is factories are being sited even in residential areas. Factories are being sited outside the prying eyes of the public, so to say. So you then have the inspectors probably not even being aware of where these places are. And most of these factory sites, the employers there resist unionization. 80%, if not 95% of the challenges we're having are coming from unorganized factories. Factories that the owners have resisted unionization, where there is no union, and we only get to know that such places exist from complaints arising from such incidents. Because when the young people then go home, they say, go to NLC, go to labor. And that is when we then get to know that you then start meandering through residential areas, you start meandering through off-road locations in some neighborhoods, and then you realize that some kind of productive venture has been going on with machines that ordinarily should be properly monitored, properly supervised and worked with, but it's not going. So definitely the regulatory capability in terms of manpower distribution, in terms of regular visitations, and maybe more campaigns, enlightenment campaigns to put the citizens to get involved. We might need to have some citizens' involvement in letting them know that some production activities should be going on in some neighborhoods. Residential neighborhoods shouldn't have factories. And where such exists, they should be able to not necessarily whistle-blow, but at least put it out there for people to know that there is a factory here. Get the ministry to establish hotlines that people can reach to say there's a factory in so-so street, there's a factory in so-so village, so that there can be some link between the citizens and the ministry.
Okay, you spoke about unionization of workers, and that most of these affected or impacted companies do not allow unionization of workers. As the General Secretary of the Nigerian Labour Congress, what more do you think the Congress can do to address this issue of maybe companies not wanting to unionize workers, of ensuring that we have mass unionization?
Ordinarily, very clearly, it's a democratic right, and for any country that genuinely loves its citizens, that should be a cause that shouldn't be left just to the trade unions. Ironically, the US president, President Biden, will tell you publicly that he's not ashamed to be called a workers' president. He takes unionization of work very seriously. It's a policy. In fairness, under his watch, there is a committee on organizing, on unionization within the White House that monitors, advises, and guides him. And for every opportunity he has, he tells corporate America, you cannot tamper with the workers' ability to organize, the workers' ability to belong to a trade union. That should be the catchphrase, even in Nigeria, if people have their own people at heart. You can't say you love your citizens, you want to serve your citizens, and you watch them under your own eyes, not that they are traveling to Europe or America in their own country being enslaved in terms of lack of appreciation of standards, which ordinarily you have subscribed to. The Nigerian government is part of the ILO family, and the ILO family is the global standard on managing the world, which is a tripartite nature, the government, the employer, and the worker. So you should consciously create an enabling environment, consciously put up policies and activities that encourage your citizens to exercise their right to unionize, to organize. So it should be an aberration. Managements that put up stiff resistance very forcefully should be discouraged. They should know that it will be wrong, there can be room for them to do business genuinely if they refuse to recognize the right of the worker to organize, because it's a fundamental right. It's a right the Nigerian government has given into by ratifying the conventions, the ILO conventions in that regard. So clearly for us is the need to really begin to see the Nigerian citizen as human, that should enjoy some rights, rather than see it is their business. You can't say it's the business of your citizens, because their health and safety should be paramount to you, and their health and safety starts with you showing interest, and then them also collaborating with you, and not throwing them to the dogs to an exploitative employer. Any employer that understands the world of work genuinely cannot say no to unionization. But to anyone that is crude, that wants to belong to the Stone Age, then shouldn't have any room operating in a modern environment. So clearly, that's the standard we should be wishing for, because that is the right thing to do.
When it comes to inflation that we're experiencing in the country, talking about forex that is not stable, how do you think decent work can be prioritized in this kind of situation? Because the employers also have to make profit.
Yeah, clearly for us is for all hands to be on deck. There can be an employer without an employee, and there cannot be a company without a worker. So when people make the heavy wind of workers, it becomes a challenge of chicken and egg, which comes first. You're not going to call yourself a top flight blue chip company if there are no people working there. People have to work for your company to answer blue chip. You won't answer blue chip from the thin air. And if the conditions of those working for you don't make sense, then it's an accident waiting to happen. So clearly, the decent work agenda is an agenda that is for the sustainable existence of the world. It's for us to have certainty of job security, the social protection being available, the work environment being safe, provisions to make sure nobody is left behind. So any environment you think there can be work without it being decent means you are deluding yourself. And that is what then leads to continuous decline. You are not going to have a productive sector like what is happening in the education sector with unhappy staff. It will then be your productivity and the products that will come out of that will not meet standards, and it then becomes a vicious circle. So from the takeoff point, there's no cutting corners. It has to be a decent job every step of the way. It cannot be for one part and then the other part will be out of it. No, because like the saying goes, one bad apple spoils the lot. So every apple in this instance has to be top flight. So clearly for us, it's for government to appreciate the need for decent work environment in terms of the pillars that constitute it, because in the long run, it pays off everybody. If the worker is properly remunerated, he would then be able to have decent purchasing power to purchase the goods that are being produced and pay for the services being rendered. If you don't have that, then you are trying to milk just a few. So if you produce a million cars and only 10 people have the capacity to buy it, yeah, that car industry is going to fold up. So you cannot put much emphasis on one side and leave the other. You must strike that balance. So clearly for us, it's something that all hands must be on deck. Nobody is more important than the other. Once we begin to appreciate that it's a tripod and that we need each other to sustain the existence of the world, then it definitely will appreciate the concept of decent work agenda.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for the fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember that labor creates wealth.